Summer's too late to start worrying about next year. And so, just going to show you how you can have the best year next year if you start doing the right things right now. I know that right now we're thinking about end of year. We got a test coming up. The state test is really what's consuming us right now. But what I want to focus on today as a next year, because I want you to have the very best year, and I know that you do too. But what we're going to do is really focus on what you need to be doing right now to have the very best year, because summer's too late to start worrying about next year. Many of you have already adopted your school calendar. You've already got that going, but that's where we stop. It's like we adopt the calendar and then we survive the year and then we start thinking about next year, and actually we're too late. And so what I'm hoping to do today is I'm just going to show you how you can have the best year next year if you start doing the right things right now. So the very first thing we got to understand is, let's just jump into this word best, because when we're talking about the word best, we think about better than last year. And I don't want you to think about best through the lens of comparison. I want you to start thinking about best in a different way. And many times when we are thinking about next year, we are thinking, what are we going to do next year that's going to be different? And a lot of times we start adding. We're adding this, we're adding that. And what we soon recognize is that we are not preparing for the best year, we're preparing for the most year. Best and most are actually opposite of one another. If you're trying to be the best, you cannot focus on doing the most, because the people who are the best are very strategic and they're very selective. On your notes, write down the word eliminate. There are things that you have to eliminate next year if you want it to be the best year. And so I hope to show you how we're going to do that. Now, if you go into the dictionary and look up the word best, it is going to say that best means most effective, most efficient, most desirable. And so it's always an adjective preceded by a superlative. And so the word that I'm going to give you for today that I really want you to be focused on to have the very best school year is, I want you to have the most prepared plan, so that way you can be successful. And if you are preparing in June, in July, you're actually not going to be the most prepared. And I'm going to show you today why you're not going to be the most prepared. Also, I want you to think about it this way. Many times when we're creating the very best school year, we're actually responding to all the problems we had this current year. And so, honestly, what we're doing is we're creating a new year based on reacting to last year. And so, when we're trying to create the very best school year, I want you to move from reactive to most proactive. Like, let's start anticipating everything that is going to prevent us from being successful next year. And let's figure out how we can be the most proactive. So, when we're talking about this, the most prepared and the most proactive, those things mean best. But what are we talking about? The best at what? What are we trying to be the best at? Because you think about it, we want to have the best year, and then we don't really say, what do we want to be great at? What do we want to be the best at? So here is what I think that every principal and I think every central office leader should be focused on. We want to be the best at having the best plan of action. And I'm going to show you today some things that you should be doing that will help you have the best plan of action. But let's be more specific. Let's be more prepared. Let's be more proactive. The best plan of action that does what? Builds the best people. Now, why am I saying builds the best people? Because many of you are going to be experiencing working with staff who are deficient in certain areas. You're going to be working with people who are uncertified. You're going to be working with people who don't even have a degree and they're in teaching positions. And I know that in some of the states that are on the call today, you've got some adjustments that you've got to make to this. But what I'm going to tell you is this, is that you already know pretty much 80% of the staff quality you're going to be having next year. And here's what you've got to understand. If you don't understand the quality of the people that you have currently right now, then you have no way to build the best plan of action to do what? Grow all students. Because at the end of the day, what are we trying to do? We are trying to be the best at growing all students, but we have to do it with 4 things that I think are critically important. So I'm going to map out a few things that I think that you should be focusing on right now in March to have the best school year next year. So where do we start? That's really the question. Where do we start? In the first place that I want you to start thinking about this is if you're going to have the very best year, you have to start with your calendar. Now, you've already adopted your calendar, and this is where I see lots of leaders just they adopt it and then they leave it and they don't come back to it until like it's, hey, we got meet the teacher, let's get ready. That's the wrong way to think about it. The way I'd like you to start thinking about your calendar, if you're going to have the best school year, is that your calendar is your budget. It is the budget you've been allocated to get the best results, to get the best growth. So, what do we need to do to be most prepared and most proactive to build the best calendar? You ready? The very first thing that you must do with your calendar is don't build next year's calendar. You have to evaluate this year's calendar first. And so when we're evaluating this year's calendar, we need to evaluate it in such a way that we need to identify how do we improve this current calendar for next school year so we can be very successful. So on this next slide, I'm going to give you some things that you need to be looking for. I would start in July. I would go back to July 2025 and I would start looking at every month and I would get people alongside me. I would not do this by myself because you have blinders, you have blind spots. You only see things through the lens of what you perceive. Your perceptions are mostly wrong because you're only thinking of things through where they impacted you. So let's just start thinking about what you can look at in your calendar to figure out how do we make it better. So these are just a few things that I came up with. Like, where in our calendar did we have double bookings? Now, what I'm talking about double bookings, I'm not talking about meetings. I'm talking about when did we have a massive event on top of assessment week? Where did we have everything coming at once on our teachers in 1 week? They had to do this report, they had to get this in, and oh, by the way, grades were due. I want you to think about all the things that created chaos for your teachers. Number 2, where were the good weeks in our school year? Why do you need to know the good weeks in your school year? Because the things that are in your double bookings, you could probably reallocate them to your good weeks. So that way you can make sure you're balancing out the work. So that way your teachers are not constantly overloaded. You need to be looking for terrible weeks. That is a great question to ask your teachers in PLC or your teams. Like, go back to the calendar and let's remember the pain. Where were the terrible weeks? Here's another thing, leaders, that you really want to be looking for. Hey guys, where did we come up with the last minute task that really aggravated you? The last minute task that frustrated you? The last minute task that created not just stress, but distress? It just created chaos in our building. You see where I'm going here? Because a lot of the reason why your teachers are not most prepared is because they were having to be most reactive because what? We did not map out our school year. And the final thing I would think about is this. Where are the new ideas that we need to put in place? What are the new ideas we need to consider putting in place to make our calendar better? Now, let's go a step further with your calendar. The next thing you want to look at in your calendar is what is the thing that is going to be the most effective at guaranteeing student growth? Well, it's assessments. And what I see a lot of people doing is they are just throwing assessments into the calendar with no idea if it is going to align with all of the other things that are going on. I see a lot of people just picking a week and just throwing in an assessment, not realizing that they've got all these other demands that are coming in on top of that week. Here's the reason why you need to look at assessment alignment. If you have an assessment, let's just be crazy about this. Let's say we're going to do an assessment the day we come back from Christmas. Okay. First day back, welcome back. Here's a test. What do we know about that? We know that more than likely the data is going to be horrible because why? The students have been gone from school for 2 weeks. So we wouldn't do that. Now, that would be crazy, of course. But were there assessment weeks that we got horrible data simply because we crammed it on top of things that we already had in place? We had already a lot of interruptions, or let's go back to this. Maybe we were only halfway through our unit and the data was already messed up because we hadn't taught those things. That's a thing to consider. Here's another thing to consider in your calendar. What do we need to do to our events? Let's go ahead and map this out. We already know when the track meet's going to be. We already know when the ag show is going to take place. We already know when Thanksgiving dinner is going to occur. What do we need to add? What do we need to change? Hey, maybe what do we need to eliminate or delete from our calendar? See, what I want to remind you of this is if you want to have a healthy financial house, the first thing you need to do is figure out what you need to stop spending. Because you already, the problem is not you need more time. The problem is you need to identify where you're wasting time. And so let me go ahead and throw this out to you. Here's another thing to consider. Where in your calendar do you have margin? And what I mean by margin is in your calendar, you should have margin days. It blows my mind that in this day and age, we still get stressed out because snow days occur and shut down our school. And everybody goes, I'm running out of time because we did not know that there was a snow day coming. Let me go ahead and tell you a little secret. You're going to have a snow day next year. If you had a snow day for the last 3 years, you're going to have a snow day more than likely next year. And if you don't, guess what? That's called extra time. For my friends down in South Texas, there's this little thing in September called hurricane season. We don't need to worry about if hurricanes are going to mess up our schedule. Let's go ahead and be proactive and let's bank lost time due to hurricanes. Let's go ahead and recognize that Christmas is going to cause us automatically to be excited the week before. That's a margin week. It's going to cause us to be behind and we're going to have to revamp them. That's a margin week after Christmas break. And what's the purpose of a margin day? The purpose of margin day, write this down, is to catch up. If we don't build a calendar with margin, you're going to say this statement all year long. I'm behind. You're not behind. The reason you're behind is because you did not anticipate that we're going to be behind because of an event. How about this? How about margin days? Because we know that this unit that we taught last year, the kids stunk at it, and now it crammed into the next unit. Go ahead and build margin days for kids being behind in your curriculum. Let's go one more step further in your calendar. One of the things that we don't do is we do not address failure until way too late in the year. Now, when I was a high school principal, I made the mistake of addressing the failure when it was way into the second semester. That's too late. If you're in a 6-week calendar, you need to have a failure response meeting on the first 6 weeks, the second 6 weeks, the third 6 weeks. If you're in 9 weeks, you need to have a failure response first 9 weeks, second 9 weeks, third 9 weeks. Let's talk about attendance. I made this mistake dealing with attendance when it was too late for the kids to recover. How about this? We're going to respond to students with poor attendance after the first 6 weeks of school. Some of you do it in months. We're going to respond to the students who are behind in absences in the month of September. See, this is called being more proactive. You can do the same thing with behavior. If that kid goes to the office 2 times in the first 6 weeks, we're not going to wait until this problem metastasizes into a massive cancer. We're going to go ahead and get it while it's at stage 1, and we're going to go in and address it. See, when I look at the word response, I often think reaction. We have to make it more proactive. And so you need to write this down. My grading period is going to be my response period to these things. First 9 weeks, failure. First 9 weeks, attendance. First 9 weeks, behavior. Book that now. Book it now. And go ahead and build those things to start responding to failure. What's another thing that we get behind on? Can I go ahead and tell you a little secret? One of the things that I got real behind on was keeping up with staff evaluations. Raise your hand if you have a hard time keeping up with staff evaluations. All right, so here we go. You ready? It's the same thing. You need to make those appointments with yourself to do what? Have staff evaluation checkpoints. Now, I put down quarters. You can do it quarterly. I highly recommend it. And some of you have responsibilities for beginning of year meetings, middle of year meetings, end of year meetings. Go ahead and make your calendar now. Make it now. Because when you know you've got all these evaluations to do, guess what? You're not going to double book because you prioritized this on the front end. So important. So I've talked a lot about calendar. Your calendar is super duper important. And right now, you want to be getting with people to start going through and let's build this calendar because it is your roadmap to the best year. So let's go through this. What else do we need to prepare for? You're probably thinking, John, that's a lot. Calendar is a lot. Well, actually, it's not the only thing you need to be thinking about. The number two thing you need to think about is your staff. Now, raise your hand if you have someone on your campus that's coming back and they struggled this year. Okay, all of you have this. And so when we're thinking about this thing here, write this down. Staff deficits should drive next year's PD. Your staff deficits should drive next year's PD. Now, you're going to get your state test results, you're going to get all that data, and you're going to disaggregate it. I need you to understand this. Your state data is not going to tell you what's wrong with your staff. It's going to tell you what's wrong with the curriculum that deficient staff failed to deliver. I'm going to say that again. Your state data is not going to tell you what's wrong with your staff. It's going to tell you what's wrong with the curriculum that deficient staff struggled with this year. So, how should you be developing your PD? It should be built around this concept called my we factor. And a we factor is basically this. How strong are we as a team to grow all students? So I'm going to go through this really quickly. Now, there are certain people in your building that are struggling with number one. Write down the word personal organization. There are some people that are not delivering good curriculum because they are not organized. They do not have good character. They are not putting in the effort to be prepared. Okay. There are some people in your building that are struggling because they struggle following the leader. Now, is there anybody in your building right now that is not good at following the leader? Like, for example, some of you have HQIM, high quality instructional materials, where they are required to do internalization with other teachers to learn about it in a PLC. Guess what? They show up and they're not doing the learning. So if a person is struggling following the leader or struggling in learning how to get better, they have a number two we factor problem. There are some people in your building that are coming back next year, or you are going to hire them. You're going to interview them and they're the only person qualified. And you're going to notice in 3 seconds that they are struggling with an inability to build unity with their students. Have you ever interviewed somebody knowing that this is the only applicant that meets the criteria and you know automatically they're not going to connect with students, but I have to hire them anyway? Well, you need to know that. Are there people in your building right now that kids are regressing, not because of curriculum, but because of the inability of the teacher to connect with the kids? That's a number 3 problem. How many of you have had discipline problems this year in classrooms? Students are not behaving, or they are basically, write this word down, inactive. They are not throwing chairs and acting out, but their behaviors are not participating in learning. They have a work ethic problem. They have a working problem. That's number 4. Are there any classrooms where you are struggling with student apathy? Student apathy tells me you don't have a structure problem, you have a culture problem. And so as we're going through this, the state test is only going to tell you this: what's wrong with number 6, your strategy. And why is this important? Here's what you need to be doing right now. Pay close attention. When you are evaluating your campus, or district leaders, you're evaluating your district, you should have a spreadsheet where you have all the people on your list that are coming back, and you need to be able to identify, checking what are the deficiencies of those people. Raise your hand if you have a deficiency. I do. Okay, I got one. But here's the problem: we are not dealing with adult deficiencies until the kids come back and failure starts to ensue. Do you know what you call that? Most reactive. Most proactive is anticipating student failure. We are anticipating student failure. We're not waiting for failure. So guess what? We know who the people are. We know what they struggle with this year. Go ahead and create a data dashboard on your staff. Who in your staff struggles with number 1? Let's get PD around that. Who struggles with number 2? Let's get PD around that. Who is struggling with structure in the classroom? Let's get PD around that. And so the whole idea is this: write this down. We need to differentiate professional learning for the adults in the building. We have to differentiate, because a rock star teacher does not need the same thing that a brand new deficient teacher needs. And so one of the things that we've created on our website is this thing called the online PD library. Basically, it's 10 days of PD that you can get a site license and just start prescribing. Hey, you get the structure course, you get the culture course, you jump in, let's work on your personal organization. So we differentiate the PD that way. So that's the number 2 problem. So calendar's a problem. We got to work on that. We need to know our staff before we leave for summer. That's our number 2 problem. So what else do we need to prepare for? You ready? Number 3 is your assessment. Now, I have been working with so many schools on assessment this year. And what I'm going to tell you right now is I have seen very inconsistent results in a lot of schools, because we're using what the curriculum is providing us to make assessments. And what I'm recognizing is it's not preparing students for the state test. You will have performance on the unit assessment that looks like it's real high, but when they take the state assessment, it's really low. What's the real problem? The real problem is that the rigor of the unit assessment is real low, while the rigor of the state assessment is real high. And that's why you're getting this disparity. Write down the word test inflation. The reason why your kids are underperforming is because we are not developing assessments that are going to definitely prepare us for the state test. So what can you do right now? The minute that you get your state assessment results back, you need to compare the state assessment to your common assessment. Look at every assessment you gave this year, and I really want you to pay close attention to this. What most people do is they carry forward the assessments that got them the results. What is that called? Not proactive. It's actually guaranteeing you're going to have the same results. You need to be thinking right now, I need to pull this assessment data and I need to compare it to my common assessment data, because what you need to do is you need to answer this question: which test had no impact on our work? That's really what you want to know. You want to know what were the common assessments that did not benefit us, that did not help us predict what we were supposed to do. Because what we've got to do is we've got to edit them, revise them, or delete them, replace them with something else. If you fail to do this, I promise you one thing: you're going to get the same or worse results next year. Hard work is going to be pointless if you have assessments that aren't yielding the right data. So what can you do about that? We have our data-driven leadership webinar where every month we're jumping in and we're learning how to do all this data stuff. Write this down. If you're a leader, you need to be a data guru. And if you're not a data guru, you cannot lead people to student growth. Think of it this way. If you have a doctor that doesn't know how to interpret test results like a blood test or an MRI or a CAT scan, how's that doctor going to help you get better? The answer is they can't. Campus and district leaders cannot delegate or relegate the responsibility of leading data to teachers. They need teachers to lead one aspect of the data, but principals and district leaders need to be able to know how to lead data to drive leadership improvement and teachership improvement. So that's what I want you to think about. So number 3 are your assessments. If you don't tighten up your assessments and make them more prepared and more proactive, your scores are not going to go up. And let me just say one more thing about assessments. Okay. Some of you gave too many assessments this year. You had an interim assessment, you had a common assessment, you had the unit assessment, you're doing a map assessment, you're doing an iReady assessment. You're assessing all the time, and you're using all these different assessments. And guess what? When you over assess, you are basically going to overwhelm. Write that down. Over assessment means overwhelming your staff. And that is not something that you want this next year. And so I'm going to really throw something out there, and it might make some of you frustrated with me, but I'm going to tell you this because I've seen the success from it. Fewer assessments with more reliable data are better than more assessments with less reliable data. Fewer with more reliable is always better than more with less reliable. So that's what I want you to think about. Now, what else do we need to focus on? Okay, this is the last thing we need to focus on. You ready? I want the month of May, to be the most powerful month for next year for you. And this is where leaders, they're so busy with the end of the year stuff. And I get it. I've been a high school principal where I was running in one door and running out the other. I was chasing my tail every single day. But the one thing that I did as a high school principal, and I did it as a middle school and elementary principal, that was the most powerful thing in the month of May, is I held what is called May reflection meetings. This, if you will do this action right now and just book it, tell them we're going to have meetings this May, because the purpose is to gather as much data and feedback to do what? Make next year what? More proactive, more prepared, so we can build better people who get better results. And ultimately, we're going to have the best year possible. So what are the things that we need to do in our May reflection meetings? Well, let's start with the most important people that can get growth next year, and that's obviously our staff. In our staff meeting, I walk through the things of our calendar. Ask them questions about the calendar. Ask them questions about the professional learning that we provided. If y'all had professional learning and they hated it and you thought it was great, you need to rethink that professional learning. If there was a resource that we purchased for them and they hated the resource, find out why. Is it because the resource was difficult? Is it because we didn't provide enough support on that? You got to figure those things out. But what you're trying to do is craft your questions around calendar, your staff needs, your assessment, your student behavior problems, because what you want to find out is what are the strengths that we need to continue next year? What are the challenges that held us up this year? What are the changes we need to make this year? What are the supports we didn't provide that we need to provide this year? And then what are some new ideas you've got? Can I just tell you something? When you have these meetings, and notice I did not say surveys, please do not send a survey. A survey is a waste of time. You cannot get from a survey what you need in a reflection meeting. You need your staff to take ownership of making next year the best year ever. So you've got to have those reflection meetings. They are so important. But let's go a step further. Who else do you need to have reflection meetings with? I would recommend sending out parent surveys. And if you want to have a coffee meeting, you can do that. But I'm just going to warn you, if you open Pandora's box, you may not be able to close it. So I typically like to use surveys, and I want to ask parents what went well about this year, what needs improvement about next year. Hey, how well did we respond to you? Ignore the outliers, look for the consistent patterns. If they say communication is poor, communication is poor, communication is poor, communication is poor, and you think your communication is great, I got news for you. Your communication is poor because the communication has to be received in order for it to be communication. So if they say something consistently needs to be improved, listen to them and do it. Okay. Now, here's the final thing. I would highly recommend this. How about talking with your students? Like getting student feedback. You can do a survey, but you can also do focus groups and really guide them through it. If I had a focus group of students today, this is what I would do. I would have the calendar in front of them and I'd say, here's all the things we did in September. Tell us what was great. Tell us what was not so fun. Tell us what to make next September better. Next month, October, what was great? What was not so fun? What can we do to make next year better? Middle school and high school could definitely do this. I highly recommend this because student voice will really help you make next year better. Do you have to use time to do it? Yep. But this is not a waste of time. It's not even an expenditure of time. Write this down. It's an investment of time. Now, if you've got a PTO that's very involved, you can do the exact same thing with them. Get their feedback with the calendar, get their feedback on assessments. You can ask these questions. I know you're busy, but you need this information because at the end of the day, what I said at the very beginning of this is that you want to be the most proactive, you want to be the most prepared, and what you have to do is build the best plan of action to build the best people who get the best results. That's not going to happen unless you start now. The reason you have to start right now is because if you don't start right now, you're only going to build it based off of your thoughts and feelings. And write this down. My thoughts and feelings are wrong because your thoughts and feelings are about what you think. And it's not about what you think. It's not about what you need. It's about what we need. If we are going to have the best school year, you've got to bring all the people that make up your we factor into the room, your staff, your students, your parents. You've got to gather their feedback because you need to tell them, guys, I need you here because I want us to build the best year possible. So, as we're wrapping up today, I've got a little link for you. And these are just some questions that can guide you through it. It also has some questions if you want to connect with me. I've already got my time open to help people map out what they need to do next year because what I really believe is this. The success of next year is really dependent on what we do right now. And I want you to have the very best year. If you want to know more, all you have to do is jump onto my website, winkedlearning.com, check out my stuff. There's a lot of things out there that'll help you out. Let's build your plan of action to have the very best school year ever. Have a great day. God bless.